Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence Podcast with your host, Dr. Tony Huang. Today, I'm with Gavin Myers from Prudence. Gavin, can you give a quick introduction about yourself?
Of course. Thanks so much for having me here. So Prudence is an early stage venture capital firm. We're focused on seed to Series B stage companies. Interestingly, we started as a generalist firm, but over time developed specific sector expertise in really three end markets, which is real estate, construction, infrastructure. We found that these were massive markets that were hard to drop into and actually have a view that was informed and thoughtful. And thus, we liked that the sectors themselves had a lot of growth ahead and found that if we just developed specific knowledge on those, it gave us an edge out there as we were looking to source new investments. And so we're on our third fund. We have approximately 250 million under management. We actually don't make that many new investments per fund. So we really target 10, maybe up to 12 investments. And so what we're trying to do is create a portfolio of winners where we're not making a lot of bets, but we're making fewer higher conviction bets and really spending time and effort in those companies, helping connect them to industry participants and really trying to maximize their chances for success as a consequence.
And of the companies that you invest in, like how many of them have begun using like AI within their ecosystems?
Yeah, so there's really been a shift over the last 2 years. Prior to, I'd say, the kind of big ChatGPT moment where I think the world, I'd say, shifted in the technology sector, we had made either investments directly into AI companies or into vertical software businesses that had AI capabilities. But what's really shifted recently is just the overall mindset of what's possible. And this really happens every technology cycle, which is there's this new platform, this new capability, and entrepreneurs start dreaming about what can be built to solve various problems, various things that are hard in the world, that if you could now leverage this new technology, you could create something that becomes industry defining. And so most of, I'd say, the post-ChatGPT era companies that we're focused on that are specifically building solutions for our end markets and are de facto, as a consequence, enterprise focused, right? So these are enterprise vertical AI companies. Most of them have been formed in the last 24 months. So the consequence of that is that we're finding ourselves looking at companies that tend to be Series A at latest or seed stage companies. Now, I will say what's really interesting about what's happening in the market is that there's, for the first time, and I've been around the technology sector for a while, and we can go back through my bio at some point, but I've literally worked through the dot-com era. I caught the tail end of it. I'm not that old. I caught the tail end of the dot-com era, really the dot-com bust and what was left. The ensuing cycles, Internet 2.0, mobile, app ecosystems, cloud computing, SaaS, crypto, and then whatever you want to call the 2021 boom era where everything was overvalued. In all of those cycles, if you reflect back on them, which I've done quite a bit, you'll see, and one will remember quite acutely, that enterprise demand at the inception of that cycle was low. There was built-in skepticism, and nowhere was that more acute than in cloud computing. It was not that long ago, call it 2014, 2015, where Fortune 500 executives would say, seems interesting, but there's no way I'm putting my important data in the cloud. Are you kidding me? The last thing I want to do is have to pay a Russian hacker in Bitcoin to retrieve all the sensitive information I'm supposed to be in charge of. This cycle is actually quite different. In this cycle, there's top-down demand for really the productivity gains that AI has promised. And so what we are finding is early stage companies are getting through these business development, these go-to-market cycles much more quickly. They're able to get pilots signed up. Results from pilots are not just being generated, but the C-suite wants to see the results of those pilots because they're under pressure to find the productivity gains that AI promises. What that all adds up to is early stage companies are just growing faster, particularly those focused on the enterprise. And it's this rare instance where demand for technology far outpaces the supply of good solutions in the market, which gets people like me very excited. And that's why we're looking earlier. That's why we're investing more in the seed stage than at any other time in our firm's history.
So for companies that want to get like funding from you, is there like a thing that you're looking for that pushes them to the finish line so that they can get it so that they're selected for funding?
Yeah, there's never any one thing, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and just put together some metaphor that might fail miserably, but it's a mixture of ingredients that makes a great dish, right? And so the mixture of ingredients for us generally entails us, number one, gaining high level conviction on the founder or founding team, their ability to operate, their desire to be in this for the right reasons. We talk about mercenaries versus true believers. Mercenaries are in it to make money. The true believers really want to solve problems. Always going to bet on the true believers. Those are the ones who are going to deal with the ups and downs, the cycle lows, which inevitably come, the setbacks, the customer churn, the employee issues, you name it, right? They're going to have a desire to win that far outpaces any sort of impediment that gets thrown in front of them. So that's number one. Number two is that understanding of the market in which they're trying to build a solution for, and being able to accurately identify a pain point that is acute and have a product that is a solution to that acute pain point, right? Sounds basic. I've watched companies time and time again not have that nailed. Part of our benefit as a sector expert is that we either immediately know and can validate that pain point exists, or we're very close to all the market participants and don't have trouble figuring out and validating those pain points. You're always going to make a little bit of a leap of faith. The leap of faith is going to be greater the earlier you invest. You're probably going to have fewer pilots, fewer customers, fewer customer references as a consequence at the seed stage. We're still looking for that. That's hugely important. That gets even more important at the Series A and the Series B. So at the seed stage, you might have 2 to 4 customers to speak with. By the A, you might have 8 to 10. By the B, you might have 10 to 20. And you're going to talk to all of them. You're literally going to get on the phone and you're going to have an hour conversation. And you're going to go through the same set of questions with these investors and with these customers who've deployed, and try to suss out the ground truth of the product, of the company, of their capabilities, of the value added provided, whether or not there's a measurable ROI. And ultimately, that's going to dictate to us, do we feel like there's a product market fit? B, is there a pricing model that they've been able to test and learn into, so that they're getting close to identifying pricing? Pricing is a conversation you and I could spend like literally 2 hours talking about. But if you have that and you have a customer who loves the product and is going to stay, if their willingness to pay in your estimation is high, then you have 2 things, which is a customer that stays and a customer that's willing to pay more. So you have a great net dollar retention, which is hugely important to unit economics. And then you have the basis of a financial model that you can start to build out. So ultimately, what we're trying to do is bring together what we call the arts and sciences of investing. The art, some of the subtle cues you're looking for, the reads you make of people, the filter through which you accept customer feedback, and then the sciences, the hard data, the hard analysis, the analytics, the technical complexity of the product that's being built, the defensibility of that product. And you're bringing together all these inputs and you're assessing them. Right. And then you're applying your own weights, which at the end of the day is human judgment. Maybe at some point we'll have an AI agent to do that for us. But for the moment, we apply our own judgment, forged over years of mistakes and failures and success, I meant to say.
Yeah. So I'm interested in learning of your companies that you've invested in. You guys are using like the current generation of AI development, which is like the agentic systems, right? I have to assume that. And can you dive a little bit more into like how you're using it, and like can you give us some like examples of which firms using it right now?
Yeah, so there's really in a very simplistic way, there's 2 ways to deploy AI. There's either to have your own foundational models and the agents built on top of them, which we do have, and I'll walk through that. Or there's to leverage the foundational models of others and to piece together the infrastructure to leverage the capabilities of the large language models with workflows that you've identified with data that informs workflows and answers to the questions that arise as you're starting to query those workflows. And so how you build those vertical AI solutions is really important and requires an understanding of the end markets that you're operating in, which again, we know. The reason I set it up that way is because in the first instance, and we can talk about one of our portfolio companies, AI Clearing, large language models don't have the training data to ingest drone imagery, which is not actually pictures, but they're cloud points if they're coming from LiDAR equipped cameras, and be able to tell you what is being observed. And so our company, AI Clearing, has their own foundational model for ingesting cloud points from drones flown over, in this case, large infrastructure construction sites, so that they can tell you in real time by mapping what's being observed from the cloud points to what was the original design of that construction site, as well as what was planned to be built, to tell you what has been built and has it been built accurately. And so it's real-time progress tracking and quality assurance. That is a really unique setup. We love that. If you can find, that's fantastic. That's hard to build though. So it was 7 years of a science project that the company had undergone before we got involved leading their Series A. It's a very deep J curve. Most of what we're looking at is being built on top of the larger language models. These foundational models are fantastic, but they're not pre-trained on the data that sits inside of the enterprises in which we operate. And most of the hard work is, this isn't as simple as just putting a wrapper, a foundational model wrapper. This is really leveraging the capabilities of information retrieval and understanding and reasoning, but with information that these models have not been pre-trained on. And what gets pretty exciting for us is when we map out all of the potential workflows that can be automated across real estate and construction and infrastructure, it's massive, right? Let's just take a simple example of like construction. So you have various roles on a construction site: project managers, site superintendents, then you have subcontractors who do the work. All of these people have very specific tasks. Those tasks require understanding of standard operating procedures. For each task has steps that you follow. In many cases, work that has to be validated, and then work that has to be cross-referenced against some original specification. That is currently all done manually right now. You might use a project management system like a Procore or an Autodesk to keep track of various phases, but these literally are humans tasking other humans to do things that are actually digital in nature. And so we think there's a huge role for orchestration agents to oversee, in this case, micro agents performing very specific tasks just to keep up with the paper filing, the digital filing requirements on a construction site, which, by the way, are massive. There's also within the within the commercial real estate sector, there's just massive amount of information that's just like never been centralized, never been structured. This is leases, commercial lease information, right? That can be hundreds of pages long with lots of economic terms. Nobody's ever been able to pre-train any model on lease terms across different asset types. And so a lot of work is redundantly done. A lot of money is spent on lawyers. A lot of money is spent wasting time negotiating over deal points that actually, if you could look at it in aggregate, might have a fairly finite range to them. And so we think there are tools. We call this agents for agents, right? A real estate agent is really called a broker in the commercial real estate sector, but tools for brokers to do their work more efficiently. And so we see vast applications in our end markets to build these agentic solutions. They will, as I said earlier, in most cases, leverage one or more foundational models, but they will be finely tuned for the specific workflows and the data requirements to actually enhance the human that's leveraging the tools in the first place.
What's there in the future for the real estate investment market, especially with the invention of AI? Like, where would you even start?
It's a great question. And it starts with understanding all the participants in, let's just say, a real estate transaction. And there's a lot of different kind of real estate transactions, and I won't pretend to cover all of them, but let's at least frame this. So you can have residential transactions, which primarily are single-family residential property or single-family homes, all the way through commercial real estate, which is broken into at least 6 different subcategories, right? From office to multifamily to industrial, even land. You have basically everything that is not a home is commercial real estate. Parking garages, commercial real estate. 7-Elevens are commercial real estate. Self-storage is commercial real estate. And then you have at the far end of the spectrum, you have how these are bought, sold, financed, and all the participants in their various roles in there. In all of these transactions, right, you have a buying process if you're on the buy side, or selling process if you're on the sell side. And each part of those processes have an army of constituents that support each of those. Take, for example, when you buy a house, you get a mortgage, right? How do you get a mortgage, right? You go to a mortgage loan officer, they collect some information about you, they collect some information about the property, and then it goes into this unbelievable black box. We've broken down that black box, and that black box is basically digital information transferring from processing, which is just making sure all the information is there and it's accurate and it's credible, to underwriting, matching the very specific digital information about the borrower to the digital information about the home, to a basket of lenders who are willing to underwrite that credit risk and that dollar amount to lend you money at various different pricing packages. Right? All of this is done by humans right now. All of it. And that's why the cost of a mortgage, the cost of manufacturing a mortgage is approximately $16,000. It's more than a Toyota Corolla, right? To literally move digital information through a manufacturing line. We believe that will be fully automated. And so what's the role for people? The role for people, we believe, is building those human connections with the people looking for mortgages. I think there's a role for loan officers. I think there's a role for people to hold your hand through that process, to help you understand something that is a big financial commitment that you're going to do maybe 3 times in your entire life, generally spaced out by 10 to 15 years each time. You don't know where the market is. You don't know what you qualify for. You don't want to do anything stupid. This is, for the most people, their most important investment. Why? Because a lot of money, their family lives there, and they don't want it to go wrong. They don't want to look stupid doing it. So there's a role for a loan officer. Everything else behind the scenes should be automated with AI agents. Everything. And we have a company that's building that. And so that's a really good example of a big market. $4 trillion in mortgages originate every year. Super expensive and highly inefficient, wide open opportunity. And that's just one part of the residential value chain. By the way, it's just as inefficient in commercial real estate, getting a commercial loan. And so this is just one part of that value chain of buying and selling a property.
In your point of view, have you seen adoption of AI come with a lot of resistance, or were they more liberal in terms of the adoption? Because certain markets, they have various adoption rates. Like, for instance, like healthcare is a little bit more resistant because of like PHI data. Other markets like retail, they're a lot more like adaptive for AI. Where does like real estate fall into that?
It breaks down by age demographic, quite frankly. I think there are certain subcomponents of real estate, like commercial brokerage, where people view information as their proprietary advantage. I think younger people don't see it that way. And quite frankly, they don't have as much proprietary information to lean on. And so they want to lean on tools as that proprietary information starts to retire and leave the industry. And the same thing is happening in construction. Excuse me. I do see it breaking down by age demographics first and foremost. And that's really no surprise when you step back and think about technology job adoption in prior cycles. It tends to be that. Overall, though, that there is a strong desire to adopt AI. And it's because I think the word has been properly marketed to senior level folks that their data is their own data, and that these large language models are able to partition their generally available models that pre-train on publicly available information versus their API business, which is specifically for enterprises to leverage the computational and reasoning capabilities of these models without pre-training future versions of the models with data that's not theirs. And so I think that message has gotten through. So there's a strong desire to really look at cost structures, immovable cost structures that have had, I'd say, humans in the loop, humans running processes. Where can we get more productive? Where can we get more efficient? And that is a strong top-down dynamic that we're seeing throughout our end markets. And so I don't see any kind of like real resistance at all. I think what we also hear too is like messaging, which is I think this like common line now. So your viewers or listeners have heard this so many times now, but there's a strong belief that AI won't take your job, but a person using AI will. And so there's I'd say a lot of intellectual curiosity to lean in here and not lean out. Because I think like anybody who's had some experience with just like the basic ChatGPT systems, it's like this is pretty darn powerful, right? This works. And it's not like the old days where people are like, I don't need a cell phone. Because people actually used to say that.
So I'm curious from your point of view, like where's real estate heading right now with AI? So in the AI field, the big hot thing like a year ago was like retrieval augmented generation or RAG. Right now, the big hot thing is agentic systems or like autonomous agentic systems. I'm predicting by like end of the year, the big hot thing in the field is going to be like model control protocol or MCP within like the real estate area. In your opinion, what's going to be like the next hot thing that's going to come up?
Yeah, it'll be less about what technology is being deployed, but it's to what pain point is being automated. And so, look, I think, yes, I can answer your question technically, which is I do think it'll be kind of multi-agent architectures that enable agentic orchestration of what I generally call like micro agents. And it's to do tasks that people don't want to do today. It's preparing offering memorandums, culling together potential buyer lists, automating the outbound outreach, right? There's a lot of things, responding to inbound inquiries for leases, right? We're already seeing that. You've got a property for lease, you get a lot of inquiries. How do you sift through those? We see a ton of adoption. We have a portfolio company that's one of our fastest growing companies that helps co-working spaces, that helps self-storage operators filter out all the inbound to figure out where should our sales team be spending their time. And so I think it's orchestration and coordination of a lot of the kind of rudimentary tasks that are important, but ultimately non-differentiating and very time consuming. So I think that's the big productivity gain. But you're already seeing agents that do things like land sourcing or property sourcing because right now a human does it. You might have a tool, you might use like Placer.ai, which is a really powerful SaaS tool, but it's a data product and you ultimately have to do the searching yourself. You can start to automate the outbound sourcing of acquisitions. You can go through, okay, that's interesting. You can have agents start to send inquiries, assemble information. That information comes in, start to do some leveling of opportunities, right? We've got these 6 different opportunities. Which one is more interesting? How do we cross compare them and do it's a sourcing leveling, which we all do when we're bringing in multiple opportunities. We're trying to figure out what's the highest and best use of our time. And so all these are being built right now. And we're talking to companies that are building these right now. And we're talking to them about they're either a portfolio company of ours or one that I think if we get through that ingredient list that I walked you through earlier, could potentially be portfolio companies of ours.
For people who are like really interested in the real estate game and also interested in AI, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Shoot me an email, Gavin@Prudence.VC.
And just looking forward into the future, what are your predictions? What's the big thing that's going to happen in, say, the next 12 months and then maybe the next 3 years? Typically, beyond 3 years is a little difficult, especially with the advent of like AI. But can you just give us in the short term, what do you think is about to happen?
In our end markets, where I'm most focused are tools being adopted in the field of construction. I think construction is so ripe for change, and you've got an aging workforce, but you've got massive investments in certain end markets that are growing, like data centers. You've got infrastructure in developing countries. You've got really like energy transformation happening globally. away from like fossil fuel consumption towards renewables. And that is for good economic reason now, not just because of government incentives. And so just the amount of dollars spent on infrastructure alone is like $6 trillion, or it was 5 trillion, going up to $6 trillion. And so you've got more money coming in, more people aging out. And that with them is all the knowledge. There's just in our world, this is a big thesis of ours, and like literally 4 of our last 6 investments have followed this thesis, which is tools for the field, right? To replace human knowledge, and to augment human inefficiencies for better, faster, cheaper outcomes, to start to get at what is like the heart of a problem, which is in the case of construction, it's human capital resource deficiencies. They have to turn to automation to solve like what's on their plates right now.
Well, Gavin, thanks so much for being on the show. And until next time, stay curious.